It's like when you taste healthy love, what you were attracted to now repels you. Vulnerable, kinder, more compassionate, more understanding, curious instead of judgmental, all of that stuff. I think that makes us three-dimensional and more human. If you allow what's happening to harden you, you're going to have a fist and you're going to punch walls and you're going to be who I was 10 years ago, which is angry and unhappy and think that the world is not fair. I think this stuff should be taught in high school instead of geometry and things that we never use, right? If we were taught what a boundary looks like and how to do it and why it's important and to start setting those, there would be more self-esteem in this world.
This episode is brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for businesses. If you have ever wanted to grow your business faster than what you can right now, if you need to make more revenue, if you need more leads, if you need more clients, if you need to know how to plan your business in a strategic way in order to hit big goals, if you need to learn how to scale your business and grow your team and your business so that you have more freedom, then this program is for you. Imagine 3 days immersed with me where we cover all aspects of business, but we do it from an immersive but also an execution standpoint. We execute every step of the way, and we're looking at 5 key areas. We're looking at your psychology, we're looking at your marketing, your sales, your leadership, and we're looking at your planning and how we integrate these 5 key areas to grow your business and your brand quickly. So if you'd like to find out more information, kerwinray.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to Unstoppable today, known as the Angry Therapist, John Kim. Great to have you here, mate.
I love your voice, man. Your voice is the energy behind your voice is it's explosive, but calm. I love it. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's good to have you here. I almost expect you to go, thank you. It's good to be here. Sorry, I didn't blow your eardrums out there. Mate,
but that was 10 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, right. Okay. So there was an angry man in there at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's amazing. And I'm keen to find out more about this journey. And I got to say, like when my producers put me on you across my desk, I was interested. But what's interesting is I'd already heard about you. I already stumbled upon you in a couple of articles. So yeah, this is kind of a little bit serendipitous for me. But I am curious, and I ask all my guests this question. Well, I've only started asking it in the last couple of months. You know, you clearly do a lot. You've had a big life. You've done a range of different things. But when you're in a dinner party in a group of 6 or 8 people and no one knows who you are, and somebody asks that question and everybody drops silence. So what do you do, John? How do you answer that question?
I used to just say, I'm a therapist. And it's interesting when you say you're a therapist, people either get really quiet or they want a session right there. It's like when you say you're a police officer, they either go one way or the other. So now I don't know. I don't know what I call myself. I guess an author,
Yeah.
But I'm still a therapist, so I don't mind just saying I'm a therapist or an author.
Well, you're actually you're a licensed marriage and family therapist.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm legit.
But you're not just someone who's putting fake credentials on the wall, and you're doing really good stuff. But what I'm curious to know, mate, is where did it all begin? Because you haven't always been a therapist.
No. It started with a broken heart. It started 10 years ago when I went through a divorce and a rebirth. Before that, I was a screenwriter.
No kidding. I'm going to assume you're being a screenwriter. You clearly live in California. You're in You're in LA.
Yeah, been here for my entire life. LA, all over LA.
Yeah, right. Let me guess. Right now, West Hollywood. Am I right?
No, close. Pasadena, Glendale area.
Yeah,
but
right.
everything's 30 minutes away in LA.
Yeah, and how is it in LA at the moment? What's the temperature like in terms of Corona, everything else that's going on?
Yeah, the temperature's gorgeous as always. But it's weird because not a lot of people are out. Things are closed, of course. I don't know how it is over there, but the air quality is amazing, and there's no traffic.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah. So
you're a screenwriter, and so everybody goes to LA to be a screenwriter. But then, how do you transition from being a screenwriter or an actor, but it's that hard. Sure. But how do you transition from screenwriter to family, angry therapist?
Grinding a lot and realizing that writing screenplays wasn't making you happy. It wasn't fulfilling. And then at the same time going through a marriage that was falling apart. So it was a combination of all of that stuff. I pursued screenwriting for about 9 years, went to film school, was really passionate about it. And somewhere along the journey, lost my sense of self. And I
Yeah.
think I was doing it for the wrong reasons, chasing shiny things.
Yeah, right. It seems to me
Yeah.
there's the possibility that that skill might be able to come back and serve you at some point in the future. I can actually see a movie. I can see a movie title, "The Angry Therapist."
Yeah, it's weird the way the universe works. I mean, because of my book, I Just Be a Miserable Fuck. There's been some, possible production or movie, stuff like that. But I'm a different person now, and it's not what I'm meant to do. So
And
I
so
try to detach from that.
it was about 9, 10 years ago. You went through the relationship breakdown.
Yep, around 9 or 10 years ago. Yeah, wow, it's been a decade.
Yeah, wow. And so was that the epitome of the dark night for the soul for you? Is that what brought you to
Yep.
therapy? Is it the breakdown that
Yeah.
brought you to therapy?
I was already in therapy, trying to work on myself or fix my marriage, but I don't think I was really doing the work. Right, I was in it because I was afraid, and I was in it because I wanted to do my piece in fixing something. And then once I got divorced and started all over with nothing, no friends, no money, no career, then I started to do it for myself. Like for the first time in my life, actually
Yeah, right.
get on a path of
You
working
weren't
on me.
you weren't trying to work on yourself to please someone else. You weren't trying to work on
Right,
yourself to save a
right,
marriage. All of a sudden, you started to
right.
work on yourself for you. Holy
Yeah.
shit! I didn't even realize that I had actually done that exact same thing until you
Mm.
said that. I spent a period of my time when I was married, yeah, doing exactly the same thing. That's so interesting. And so, did you reach a pretty dark place yourself personally before you came out?
Yeah, absolutely. I hit my version of rock bottom, and it was in all areas of my life. So my career wasn't working out. I spent most of my days, 14 hours a day at a coffee shop trying to write, the $1 million screenplay. And so by doing that, I had no self-care. I had no joy in my life. I had no friends. I had no money. And then the divorce was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back that made me realize I need to change my life. I need to be someone different, or I'm just going to stay miserable.
And so, rebuilding your life whilst going through therapy for yourself, what does that look like? Like, because you've got no money, you've got no job, you've got no relationship. How did you start rebuilding?
I Well, at this point I was in therapy school, becoming a
Oh, so
therapist.
you'd already gone
And
into therapy school at this point.
yeah, at this point, I wasn't licensed, but I
Right.
was, it's actually a long road, but I was in grad school at 35. I was doing something I never told myself that I would do, which is go back to school. I'm a C student. I hate school, but I love psychology, and the universe threw me into nonprofit. And I was making like 35 grand a year. It had great benefits, but it wasn't what I imagined a therapist to be. I wanted to be like Dr. Drew. I wanted to have a fancy office with those silver balls and walk in with a latte and help people that way. But in nonprofit, I work with addicts. And I realized that we live in a fatherless nation, that dad's not home either emotionally or physically. And so working with addicts and a lot of teenagers, I just grew a fire in my belly to go on this journey of what it looks like to be a man. All of these hard questions that we ask ourselves. And although I was helping them, I felt like they were helping me. I just didn't know it at the time.
It's so interesting because I find the same construct whenever I'm doing an intervention or a coaching session. I often
Mhm.
find myself reflecting, projecting in some respects,
Right.
and hearing my own story and coaching myself. Do you remember the moment when you were in therapy for yourself where you decided that was going to be your life, and that was going to be your life from a commercial perspective?
Yeah, I was talking to my own therapist, and he said, if you can't write screenplays, if you can't, make movies, what do you want to do with your life? And I was like, man, I want to do what you're doing. If I can't move people by the masses, I want to do it one at a time. I've always loved psychology, and he was like, well, then do it. And I said, no, I don't want to go back to school. I hate school. And he's like, you just need a master's. It's a couple years. And so I did that. What he didn't tell me is you need 3,000 hours to become licensed, which ended up taking me 6 years. So
Wow.
yeah. That's a long journey, man.
And that's a part of your journey in the not-for-profit sector, I'm assuming, because that's where you
Yeah.
started to get your 3,000 hours,
Right.
correct?
Yep. And it was like that Rocky song came on, and I was the basement guy doing pull-ups. I found CrossFit. I got some tattoos. I, got a motorcycle, and I kind of went on my version of Eat, Pray, Love. Eat,
Yeah,
Eat, Love,
right.
Pray, or what? Yeah.
Yeah.
But like my version of that. So
Yeah.
finding myself through barbells and donuts and two wheels instead of going on exotic adventures, which I couldn't afford at the time.
Yeah. But I'm going to assume the gift of being thrown into a not-for-profit early in your career is it would have given you a disproportionate level of experience that most therapists would probably wait decades in order
Yes.
to receive. Because I'm going to assume
Yes.
not-for-profits, and I don't mean this in the context of labeling someone's value, but you're probably dealing with the issues that are worst of the worst. People
Yes.
can't
The
afford
the
therapy.
trenches.
Yeah, the absolute
Absolutely.
trenches. And so what
Yeah.
was that quite confronting? Because you've gone from this, I guess, this perhaps expectation, I don't know, you'll tell me in a moment, that you're going to be a therapist, much like in a context where you're used to, and then all of a sudden you're working with I'm going to assume addicts and people who've been abused. Was that quite a shock in the context of, well, hang on, I'm not sure this is what I signed up for?
100%. I was I had a lot of resistance. I was waving my masters, thinking that I was better than them, and I didn't sign up to work in nonprofit, wear a uniform, and work with teenagers. I felt like I was a school counselor. And it was really humbling. But once I was able to kind of like, let go of my ego and a lot of definitions of what a therapist looked like, then it was almost a spiritual experience where it really changed my life. And the bonds that I created with these kids it changed me forever,
And you made a quote, which I wrote down. You said, you realize that we're living in a fatherless nation.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So over the 5 years I was there, I probably helped, close to 1,000 kids, and meeting all their parents and realizing that dad's not there, either emotionally gone or physically gone. So I saw the byproduct of that, which was, boys either trying to be me or fight me, and then girls standing too close, no boundaries, and they lacked this emotional milk that they didn't get, and that's why they were addicts. They were always coping or numbing or doing something to fill a void inside. And then I got the fire to really think about what it looks like to be a man, and I was a total boy at that point. So I went on my little man journey.
A 35-year-old boy at this point.
35. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Angry.
A 35-year-old angry boy. Well, we're going to get the angry part in a moment. But what does that journey look like when you start to realize, well, shit, I'm 35 years of age, but I'm still a kid inside? How do you become a man at 35?
Oh God, I think it's different for everyone. I think it starts with first really looking inward. Who am I? What is my worth? What is my passion? It's this idea of living inside out instead of outside in.
Right.
And I think I lived most of my life, especially grew up in Hollywood, where there's just a lot of shiny things and fancy, cars and money and all that in the entertainment business. Living outside in, so exchanging my truth for membership, trying to be someone that I'm not, right? And then nonprofit stripped me of that and just threw me into the trenches, and I started to finally like humanize myself and ask a lot of hard questions, like who I am and where I want to go.
Was there any reparenting involved in that, like in terms of reparenting the younger version of yourself at the current age you're in?
Yeah, it was a lot of being alone and connecting to parts of myself that I've locked away.
Right.
If that makes sense. So
totally. Had you identified elements of codependence that were keeping you in a loop that you realized that I need some isolation, I need some solitude in order to work this out on my own?
Yeah, I think in my marriage, I was very codependent. It was very sticky, a lot of dysfunction. My dad's an alcoholic, so I've got the addictive gene. I was angry, I was reactive, all of that stuff. And so the divorce cut me at my knees and made me to finally start looking at that, right? Where it's coming from, how it's affecting my relationships, and then what can I do to change that?
And when did the angry moniker come in? Because you seem such a calm, chill dude. Like it's like you've just stepped out of a meditation center or something.
No, it's because I'm 47 now.
I could say the same thing.
Man, I think, I was angry because I was unhappy. I was angry because life wasn't going as I planned, right? All of that. And when I went through this rebirth, I had a lot of time on my hands, and Tumblr was kind of big at the time. So I created a blog And I called it the angry therapist because I just thought it was kind of funny that a therapist is angry. But what I was saying without knowing it is that I'm human. So I started to post about my feelings and that I'm, I didn't know anyone would read it. So I was very transparent. I was very vulnerable. And then I think people thought it was interesting that there was this Korean guy, on motorcycles with tattoos calling himself the angry therapist and talking about his feelings. And so that kind of started everything for me.
And did you notice that you kind of attracted a certain type of market person or people or demographic started to really resonate with the message that you were putting out there?
Yeah, so I started to write about love, and I started to write about going through a breakup and looking at the black box to see what went wrong. And I started to document, a lot of CrossFit stuff. I was into working out and self-care and all that. And so it actually ended up attracting a lot of women between 30 to 50. And I think it's because I represented something. Maybe I represented a guy who was working on himself or talking about love or being vulnerable. And maybe for them, that was lacking in their life, or maybe that was, different or something they haven't seen. I don't know.
And so fast forward to now, how old are you now? You're 47 now. So you've been on this journey.
47.
Wow. So you've been on the therapist journey for 12 years now.
Yeah.
And so what's changed? Like looking at where you are now, like you've still got the blog, you're about to write, you've just written a book. I Used to Be as Miserable as Fuck. Has that been published yet?
Yep. Yes, that's been published. It's used to be A Miserable Fuck.
I Used to Be a Miserable Fuck. That's even better.
Yeah. That was published by Harper, and it's been about a year, so it's doing really well. And I just sold another book called Single on Purpose, and that comes out in 2021.
So the screenwriting skills have come in very handy, I'm going to assume, with what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's something that I'm realizing is how the universe plants seeds, and it, like a boomerang, comes back in ways that you never thought of. And so I still channel my writing, except I'm not writing screenplays. I'm writing self-betterment books.
Yeah, right. And so I'm going to assume, do you still do one-on-one work? You're still working with people?
Yeah, I don't do a lot of that, but I do once in a while. I'll do one-on-one sessions, and I'm using social media, doing videos, and all of that stuff to throw a wider net. And
so people say that when doing therapy with you is an unconventional form of therapy. What is it about your therapy that you think makes it a little bit unconventional?
So when I started, I couldn't afford an office. So I would meet people at coffee shops. And so I called myself a coach because as a therapist, you're not supposed to do that. Yeah. The internet webcams started coming out, and I wanted to see people like this via Skype or via the webcam. And you're not supposed to do that either. And I was like, man, being a therapist is very constricting. And I wanted to show up as I was. So I met people, at a lake. I would bring them into the gym. I would do things that you weren't really supposed to do as a therapist. Oh. And I realized that, especially the new generation, they actually liked it. And they thought it was refreshing to take therapy out of the office, and I meet the client, where they're at. I mean, literally, and showing up just on my Harley with the jeans and a t-shirt and coming in as myself. I think they thought that was different. And so I feel like that's kind of the new way where people are more interested in who you are instead of the letters after your name.
Wow. What an authentic way to present, and what a way to disrupt. I didn't do it on purpose. No, I can tell you didn't do it on purpose, right. but I'm just speaking to what you've shared, which is what a way to present to someone who you're looking for, to support. Because obviously if someone's going to a therapist, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, I've done a lot of therapy over my life, but if someone's new to therapy, there's often a lot of assumptions, there's a lot of fears, there's a lot of unknowns, uncertainty, and those are the things that will often prevent people getting to the level of vulnerability that's required to share the meaningful things that can really make an impact when they're delved into. But showing up on a fucking Harley, like taking someone into a CrossFit gym, turning up at a lake, like that literally disarms someone straight away. And it's like, wow, okay, something's different here. And I'm hoping that this is going to be perhaps, a signal of where therapy could go in the future. Do you think there's any possibility that therapy could potentially go this way in the future, where it is perhaps a little bit more acceptable from a legal standpoint to be able to work with clients in this way?
I don't know. I hope so, because I think the clinical world, it needs an update.
Big
You know,
time.
it needs a refresh. I know that when I started, you weren't supposed to see anyone out of your state, especially online. And I don't know what they're doing now, but yeah, you know, we have the technology to jump into anyone's living room at any time. Like, that's amazing to me. So
Mm.
like, why not use that? And so. I don't know. I think it's changing. I think the temperature of wellness and therapy, the stigma is slowly dissolving, and I think we are interested in a new way of helping people.
And I think that could end up being one of the benefits of COVID is, you know, because what we're
Yeah.
seeing right now is some benefits in the medical space here in Australia, and I'm not sure what it's like over there,
Mhm.
where doctors are finally able to do more, you know, online consultations. And again, I'm
Yes.
not sure of the breadth in terms of the therapy side and the psychology side, but to me, it would seem, especially with the situation that we are in globally right now, there's almost a requirement for therapy to go online because
Hmm.
of the isolation. And it's not just
Right.
because of the isolation, but also because of the, I'm going to suggest, the impacts of the
Yes.
isolation.
Yeah.
And again, there's not a lot of data that's coming out there right now to suggest how good or bad that is. But you know, I'm sure you would agree it's a little concerning that there are a lot of people out there right now who are mentally unwell, who need support and aren't able to get it because of the situation that we're in globally.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff happening. I think that's going to change. Also, a lot of group work. So
Mm.
using things like Zoom, where you're running therapy groups, where you're using the community, whether it's 5 people or 20, to all grow through each other instead of this one-on-one thing. I think when you do therapy in an office, the stigma of going into an office and feeling like there's something wrong with you, especially with men, you know, a
Mm.
lot of men won't go to therapy because the stigma behind it. But you know, if I say, "Hey, meet me at the gym or meet me at the lake. We're going to go for a run," you know, it disarms them. It's a lot more casual over clinical,
Yeah.
right? And of course, you have to do it with boundaries and with, you know, structure. But I think you're just going into it more with someone instead of
Mm.
at someone.
It's almost like creating a human therapy versus a clinical type of therapy.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
and
really?
listen, I'm not for everyone, and there's going to be a lot of pushback, and I
Yeah, I
get a
get it.
lot of pushback from clinicians.
Of
But
course.
I decided, you know, 10 years ago when I went through my rebirth, I'm going to live in a way that's honest to me, and I did the clinical stuff. So I worked in high end treatment centers. After the nonprofit, I worked in, you know, in Malibu, and I worked in different rehabs and stuff. I had a full private practice, and I felt like Clark Kent pushing the mail cart. And then when I
Mm.
was doing things my own way, when I was showing up, you know, in the jeans and the Harley, and let's just go do a workout and do life if we're going to talk about life, I felt more like Superman. I felt more like I was, you know, at my potential.
Yeah, right. What have you found more effective in the context of therapy, group or individual?
Group. Group is so powerful. Have you seen that movie, The Breakfast Club?
Oh God. Oh my God. That's like a
In
really
the
old
80s.
movie. Yeah, yeah, but I can't even remember it. But yeah, I think I saw it like
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah, it's a John Hughes film, but it's about kids in detention and how they kind of like bond through that hour. And group is like that, you know, different people, different walks of life, and kind of growing through each other. I
Mm.
think um, that at the intersection of technology, and now that the webcam and things like Zoom is common language, I think it's so power. I think it's going to be the new way. I think it's what people want, and I think it's also going to make therapy cheaper because
Mm.
therapy can be very expensive.
It's interesting because I found the same correlations when I'm working with my clients because, you know, I am, you know, I guess considered a coach. I do work in the performance space, specifically mainly,
Mhm.
you know, 90% of that, 80% of that in business and 20% is in other areas of performance. But what I find, which is echoing what you're saying, is I get far more traction in a group environment than I do in an
Yeah.
individual environment. And what I find, and maybe you can relate to this, is when people are talking in a group environment, there's a lot more therapy going on than when
Yeah.
there's one person having a conversation.
Sure.
But there also seems to be greater levels of accountability
Yes.
when, you know, people are making, you know, declarations, not just to a therapist. They're now making declaration to one therapist and perhaps, you know, seven
Right.
peers.
Yeah, and there's different perspectives, and as a therapist, you're facilitating instead of lecturing or trying to control the
Correct.
group, and the group kind of takes a life of its own,
Mm.
so which is really
And I
powerful.
think that's the key, facilitation. So, mate, I'm going
Yeah.
to assume you've learned some incredible lessons in life, in love, relationships, addiction, about being a man, in therapy in general. What is the thing right now that you look at the world and you go, okay, if there's one thing I'm seeing that, because again, there's a lot of individual applications, but let's look global now. If there's one thing that you see the world really needs right now, what do you think that is?
Oh man. I think the world needs to, and by the world I mean also individually. Um, with what's happening, I think it's either going to harden us or soften us,
Mm.
depending on what comes up and how you process that. So whenever we're forced to sit still, like we're doing now, there's going to be a lot of resistance. There's going to be a lot of fight, and you could either run away from yourself or toward. And so we're running toward yourself means to really examine what's coming up, where it's coming from, and processing that. Running away from yourself means to be judgmental, to react. Everything that's going to get you to disconnect you with you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes total sense. So you're talking
Yeah.
about how do we become hardy, not hardened?
Yes. How do we be? And when I say softer, I don't mean that in a weakness way,
Yeah,
right? I
and
mean,
vulnerable.
I mean vulnerable, kinder, more compassionate, more understanding, curious instead of judgmental, all of that stuff. I think that makes us three-dimensional and more human. If you allow what's happening to harden you, you're going to have a fist and you're going to punch walls and you're going to be who I was 10 years ago, which is angry and unhappy and think that the world is not fair.
And so perhaps there's someone out there right now who's listening to this and going, man, I can really relate to that part of the life where, I was completely, I was unfulfilled pursuing something that I thought I wanted to do, but I became disillusioned. I'm in a bad relationship or not the relationship I want, or I'm an angry person, or I'm all of those things. If you were to look at someone in that same situation, go, look, I've only got 5 minutes. Okay. But here are the
Oh God.
no, but let's
Right.
take the speed therapy, right? That can maybe
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
What
Yeah.
would be here are the 2, 3, 4 things that, really helped me that if you do follow, tick them, it should put you on at least the path to some form of, development.
Yeah, so I talk a lot about containers, which is our life space. I call it a container. A lot of us have cracked containers. So if you're in an abusive relationship, that's a cracked container, and a cracked container stunts your growth, right? And you can make your own container. You could rebuild your life space. And so that would be my first thing. What does that look like? And working inward, I would say we all have a pseudo side, which is the false, the inauthentic, the approval seeking, the codependency, all of that, narcissism. And then we have a solid self. The solid self is the authentic self, and usually the solid self is a quiet whisper. It's the voice that we don't listen to because of society and all of that, and especially now with social media. We usually listen to our pseudo side. So I would say to start listening to your solid self, and that's going to change the projected trajectory of your life. And that's kind of like what I did. My screenwriting days, my Hollywood days was all pseudo. It was me listening to who I should be, where I should go, what happy should look like. And then my solid self after the divorce, when I had nothing, it was like, what is my truth? How do I stand on it? And keep listening to that until that voice grows louder and louder. And then you start living inside out instead of outside in.
I think you guys have the same level of divorce rates that we do in Australia. It's something, catastrophic, like 2 out of 3 marriages end in divorce. And look, I'm sure we could point to a whole range of different variables, and this is less about divorce and more about the context and the containers of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to be an area that is, there's a new book coming out. There's always another article, and it seems to be a hot topic because everyone is in relationship with somebody, and so
Sure.
as a result, relationship dynamics are common in everyday life. Not everybody has the awareness to be able to govern or to be able to be aware of the role that they play and the quality of those. But you mentioned pseudo self, and I've experienced this myself because going back, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, I was the ultimate chameleon. I was totally pseudo. I could
Right.
morph into any situation,
Yeah.
circumstance, and I could be whoever was required at that moment. But after 10 years of doing that, I kind of, or maybe more, maybe 25 years of doing that, up at the point of my late 20s, I really started to lose who I was.
Right. Right.
And I think that in itself, demonstrates one issue that some of us deal with, is trying to be something that we're not in order to please the masses.
Mhm.
But it also,
Yeah.
to me, when I look back, it also helps me understand why some of the relationships that I had played out the way that they did. Because
Sure.
oftentimes I would, being a pseudo self, I would attract others who were pseudo selves.
Right.
So you'd have
Right.
two pseudos trying to have a
Yep.
relationship without actually
Yep.
really getting to know who that solid self really was.
Yeah, and you just have a lot of cardboard cutouts
Yeah.
instead of actual people. What was the catalyst in your life that made you start listening to your solid self?
I got an absolute. It was in Perth. It was. I could almost tell you the year. I think it was 2003, and I
Mm.
just been on. I just had I guess you could say an unwarranted, uninvited coaching session from a really good mate of mine, who just laid it on the
Mhm.
line and said, "You are just so full of shit." He goes, "You are just,
Uh,
a
he
total."
called you out.
Called me out big time, and I went on a walk.
Yeah.
And I was walking through Perth, and I literally happened across a lady who collapsed right in front of me. She has a heart attack right in front of me, and so all of a sudden,
Wow.
I'm resuscitating this lady. I've got police and ambulance there, and then whether it be 7 to 12 minutes later, I'm putting this gurney in the back of an ambulance. The doors slam, the police run away, and the ambulance takes off, and I'm standing there by myself. And I looked down, and there was a plaque that said October 1974, and I was born in October 1974.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was at that moment. Yeah, I made some pretty big choices, but it took time. And I think you would agree. Like whenever you make a choice,
Yeah.
change in most
Yeah.
cases. Despite what some people say, it doesn't always happen in an instant. A change in perspective
No.
can happen in an
Right.
instant. But it took a period of time of me I actually went on to take 2 years off, did nothing,
Mm.
just to find
Mhm.
out who am I when I'm not distracted. Who am I
Oh, I like that.
when I'm not pursuing something? And are you familiar with
Yeah.
David Deida?
Mhm. Yeah. His book, The Way of the
Oh,
Superior Man.
fuck, every boy should read that, right? Every
Yeah,
boy
that's
should
the
read
first thing I read after my divorce, and it
Oh,
inspired me.
perfect.
Yeah.
And that was one of the
Yeah.
books that came across my desk at the time, and he talks about the importance of doing nothing so as not to be
Mm.
distracted, to find your genuine purpose. And that's what I did. I spent 2 years doing nothing to find out who the fuck is this guy that I've been living with for 32 years, 30 years at this point. And it was pretty confronting, I've got to say.
Yeah, and this is what's happening with the world. We're forced to do nothing right now, in a way,
Mm.
other than take in all the chaos that's happening. And so, what happened to you can actually happen, I think, on a global scale with what's happening, being forced to do nothing and being confronted by all of these things that you're talking about, and then making that choice. Who am I? There's a lot of people making big life decisions. There's a lot of divorces happening. There's a lot of things happening because of the pandemic.
And I think it's going to be a great trigger for awareness and growth and consciousness overall. I
Yeah.
think it's going to be
Yeah.
perfect. But where I'm going with this is when you start becoming more aware of your solid self, you start seeing pseudo in others. It becomes a lot more apparent.
Yes, absolutely. Your lenses change.
Yeah.
It's like when you taste healthy love, what you were attracted to now repels you.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think that as we change internally, and that's what we're talking about, when you start pulling from your solid more than pseudo, and you actually change internally, you're right. You have less tolerance for bullshit or for fakeness or anything like that.
But this is where I found the context of judgment can creep in, because you start judging others and self and putting yourself perhaps in an elevated position. Go, well, I can't relate to that person the way that I want because I can still see pseudo elements of their self. And it was like when I first started studying, I did this mad 15-year dash where I studied deception at a really high level. I studied with Paul Ekman and David Matsumoto and Phil Houston, and I studied the world's best analysts when it comes to detecting deception in physical environments. And all of a sudden, in the first 3 years, I became completely disillusioned because I realized, holy shit, everybody's lying.
Yeah.
Like, for real.
Right.
I'm like, fuck, everybody lies every day. But then
Right.
it took me a period of time to go, well, everybody lies for different reasons. Some people are lying because they are legitimate, they're legit fucking scumbags, but some people are lying because it's just self-preservation. It's because how they were taught. It's I'm
wiring.
Yeah, it's a wiring. And sometimes a woman will look in the mirror and go, oh, I'm just so ugly, but she's a goddess. And that in itself is still some form of deception. And so I kind of had to find this place where it was like, okay, everybody lies, but for different reasons, but it's not a reason to remove someone from your life completely. It's a reason to perhaps want to understand them more. And so when we now contrast that against relationships, because there's going to be a lot of people that are, finding more of their solid self. And as they find more of their solid self, they're going to see more pseudo in others. But perhaps when they see the pseudo in others, they're going to look at that as a reason not to relate. not perhaps
Right.
giving way to the possibility that there's a solid self under there that just needs some support to remove some of the pseudo aspects of their life. Now, without getting into the dynamic of what would be considered a codependent dynamic, how do we, as we start to grow, manage ourselves, but also in relationship to others, so that we don't just, hit everyone with the same brush and go, well, you're your pseudo self, so I can't relate to you yet. I can't get deep with you. How do we navigate that? How do you distinguish?
Yeah, I think as you become more authentic or comfortable or connected to yourself, if you draw boundaries where you let certain people in because they're the kind of person that you actually want to build a relationship, and then you don't. I think that's great, but if you do it to the extreme where you create your own island, then that in itself is pseudo. So if you are now judging everyone because you're on a you're like self actualized, or you think you're on a pedestal because you're so solid, that's actually not solid. To me, that's actually pseudo. It's like you've now gone the other way. I think pseudo self is vulnerability. I think it's compassion. I think it's acknowledging your journey, your weaknesses, your story, but also other people as well. So if you see pseudo in someone, instead of judging them, try to see where that's coming from. Try to be a catalyst. Try to understand before being trying to be understood. And I think that's more solid, not kicking people out of your life.
Oh, fuck, I love this conversation. And so now, I guess, have you got much experience with addiction?
Yeah, I mean, about 5 years
Yeah.
of helping people, but also my dad was an alcoholic, and so seeing it in my father as well.
And so what have been some of the ways that you've seen people progress in addictive environments, where they're either an addict themselves or they're someone that's in an addictive environment? Like, what have you seen as some of the pathways that people can take? Let's start with the addict. Like, maybe there's someone out there who's identified themselves where they realize that there's an issue with either a substance or a behavior, but they haven't got to the point where they've actually got help yet. What advice would you give for someone who's in that situation, who's listening?
Usually you have to hit rock bottom. Usually, because whatever you're addicted to comes first, right? Comes above your marriage, your friends, your job, whatever. The true addict, that is number one. And so in order for them to decide that they don't want that in their life anymore, they have to hit such a low where they lose something and they're like, okay, I can't do this anymore. So a lot of times they lose custody or lose their favorite career or friends or whatever, and then they say, okay, I'm done. Most people don't draw that line. Most people think that they could turn down their addiction and keep going, and it always rears its ugly head. It's with you forever. You have to learn how to control it.
And so perhaps let's talk to the people who see themselves on the milder spectrum of addiction, who are going, fucking hell, I don't want to crash my life in order to get better, but I'm aware that this could potentially progress if I don't actually do something about it. What advice would you give to them?
To actually do something about it, meaning most people talk a lot of shit. Most people read a lot of books. They don't put action behind their words. So if you are if you have an addiction, whether that is drugs, alcohol, porn, sex, whatever it is, thinking about it and talking about it isn't enough. Like, what are you actually doing? What are you doing? If you want to change your body, you could watch a lot of workout videos, but if you never get your ass in the gym, nothing's going to change. And so you have to change your life. You have to change your perspective. You have to change your wiring, as we're talking about. It's not just, okay, I'm going to, do something. I'm going to read about something. I'm going to, consider something. There's a difference between being interested and being committed. And I think addiction takes commitment.
What is the benefits that you've seen of addiction? Because I'm going to assume after 5 years of working with addicts, it's not all bad news. Okay, I'm someone that's identified as an addict.
Sure.
And I've seen the balance in the condition that it presents. What have you seen as some of the balance in the condition of addiction?
They're charming. They're charismatic. Yeah, absolutely. Obsession. Because a lot of addicts get obsessed with things and they get great. So whether it's fitness, usually when you plug your addiction, you get obsessed with something else, and that becomes your new addiction. A lot of people stop drugs, but then now they're working out 4 times a day, and they get obsessed with that. So when you're an addict, you're an extremist. And I think the gift in that is whatever you get obsessed about, if it's a positive thing, you're probably going to be really good at it. The flip side to that is you're also going to put a lot of pressure on yourself. And so a lot of addicts don't like themselves. So there's no balance. So it's basically all or nothing. You either win or you're a loser. There's no second place.
Well, that I can certainly relate to that. I want to skip back for a second, because you started saying some words before that I wanted to go down, but I didn't go there, but I will now. One of the things that I've discovered in relationships is the importance of boundaries. Having boundaries. But first of all, knowing what a boundary is, knowing what your boundaries are, and then knowing how to communicate them in an effective way. Would you say that perhaps a lot of relationship issues could be easily managed if there were perhaps a greater understanding of what boundaries were when it came to teaching people how to relate versus just allowing people to relate and hoping they can work it out themselves?
Yeah, I think this stuff should be taught in high school instead of geometry and things that we never use, right? If we were taught what a boundary looks like and how to do it and why it's important, and to start setting those, there would be more self-esteem in this world with people. So yeah, I think boundaries are everything. If you don't know how to set a boundary, you're puncturing your self-esteem balloon. You're going to train yourself to let people walk all over you, or you're going to mute yourself. You're going to do things where you're, again, suppressing that solid self. And what's going to happen is you're going to be angry, resentful, depressed, all of that.
And so what does a boundary look like?
I would kind of break it down to, I'm trying to think of a way that, we haven't heard before. I think it's about, are you, whatever, if it's a person or whatever it is, a work situation or whatever, is it expanding you or constricting you, right? And if it is constricting you, how much of that is you and how much of it that is the other object, the person, the work, whatever. And if you could say honestly, it is the other person or then a boundary needs to be set. If your relationship with the other person is expanding you, then that's a good thing. That's someone, creating a safe space for you. And so if you're in an abusive relationship, there's a lot of constriction, there's a lot of restriction, there's not a lot of expanding,
And so how do you, when you realize that, holy shit, I perhaps don't have a lot of boundaries, I'm perhaps feeling myself being punctured in this relationship, and I now need to start putting them in. How do you teach someone to start putting in boundaries in a healthy way that doesn't necessarily cause all sorts of, because here's what I've discovered. The moment you start putting boundaries in, that's when you really start to see what people, you learn a lot about people's emotional maturity when you put a boundary in place.
Sure. I think the inability to draw a boundary is the result of something deeper. So instead of just saying you need to draw a boundary, which they may not have the tools to do that, it's examining their relationship with themselves, and the stronger your relationship with yourself is, boundaries are automatically drawn. If your relationship with yourself is poor, if you think of yourself as, not valuable, not lovable, if you think you're a piece of shit, you could give them all the tools and all the how-tos and drawing a boundary. They're probably not going to draw a boundary, So I think it's about going to the core, which ultimately is about your relationship with yourself. What does that look like? Is it healthy? Or is it, abusive? Is it toxic? Yeah.
It's so interesting because, in school we are taught, so many things that are completely irrelevant, but one of the most important things that we need to know is how to relate to other people. And even in most cases in relationship contexts, people will teach you how to relate to other people, but they won't necessarily teach you how to relate to yourself.
Yeah, no one talks about that. I mean, even especially also more so with men, and that's why we're chasing this scoreboard. We are performing. We're finding worth in the external because our relationship with ourselves is not something we visit.
You've brought up the men a few times now, and being a man, I appreciate that, but I also know that there's a context around, this whole toxic masculinity, and what is it to be a man, and there seems to be a lot of confusion out there around not only what is toxic masculinity, but what does it mean to be a man, and how do we become a man? And so with all the experience that you've had, like, how do you have that conversation with someone? Like, where do you start?
Yeah, so I don't ever try to put on my definitions onto anyone else. I think we all have our own definitions, and that's what's important. I think we all need to go on our journey, and that journey is forever, right? I'm not off of my journey. It just becomes a new one. But it's the men that never go on one. It's the men that never look inward. It's the men that grow up in locker rooms and have distorted definitions of what a man looks like. I think those men are angry, are dangerous, are reactive. And they're very they're posturing, and they're pulling from their pseudo self, holding up shields. That to me is toxic masculinity. I think when you decide to actually look inward, to be vulnerable, to go on your self-betterment journey, to actually want to be a better version of yourself, to explore what's wrong and why. That's the beginning, I think, of creating a new definition of man. And what's happening in the world right now, the soil is so rich for men to create new definitions.
How important is it for young boys to have a rite of passage when it comes to that transition between, boyhood and adolescence and adulthood, becoming a man?
Yeah, my divorce was my rite of passage.
Yeah, wow.
That was I think it's imperative, and I think in other cultures there is that. I don't know if there really is one in like cities and in America.
No, when you look at most ancient cultures that are alive today, there is an initiation process.
Absolutely.
There is a ceremony. There is there's an education of sorts. You finally go hunting with the men, or Do you think that it's something that is really missing from today?
Yeah, I think we should create one. I think everyone. I don't know, but that would be amazing, because what happens is, because we never have that, we just we grow up, become adults on paper. I mean, but we're boys, and we're just trying to perform or outdo or posture, and we never become mature. We never become men inside. We just look like one on the outside.
Let's change gears a little bit now, as we're moving towards the pointy end. You're now a dad. You've remarried.
I'm not married, but I have a girlfriend, and I am a father, 5 months.
Wow.
47. Yeah, I did the math, and when I drop her off at high school, I'll be 64, and they're going to be like, your grandpa is
your grandpa's picking you up. Cool, man. He's got a Harley and tattoos, man.
Oh man. But I'm glad I did it later, because when I was 20, or most people have kids that I wouldn't have the tools. I would have not been there. Yeah. I would have been like the dads that I told you I saw when I was working in nonprofit, who was not there.
Same. I didn't have my son until I was 38 and
nice.
After 38. And so for me, there's so many correlations between yourself and your journey. My divorce, same. I got divorced 4 years ago now. And that was my rite of passage. It was the first time that I actually took the time to start unraveling all of my loops, and really doing a disproportionate level of, solitude and self-reflection, to start going, who the fuck am I really?
Right. And even us having this conversation and realizing that our stories are parallel, but we're just two men who are, interested about being better version of ourselves. That connection is powerful, and I think maybe the rite of passage that men need is actually each other, to stop being on an island, right? So to have these conversations, over coffee or whatever, instead of about just sports and how much money you want to make and what kind of cars you want to drive, maybe have conversations like this, how you're feeling and who you want to be, because men don't talk like that.
And so what have you learned in the first 5 months of being a dad about yourself?
Oh man, the first 3 months is just survival. It's just, and the baby's a blob.
I should probably come back at the 15-month mark and ask the same question.
Yeah.
Might be different answer.
But now I'm learning about patience. I'm learning about moments. I'm learning about reshuffling what's important to me, and I don't want to rush this and hope that she's 2 and 5 and 7. I want to enjoy the moments, because they say the days are long but the years are short. So I'm just trying to stay present as much as I can. It's hard, it really is.
Yeah, it is. And I, as a dad myself, I have to say, as someone who's development orientated, it's been the best development program I've ever signed up for.
Oh yeah, of course, of course.
From a leadership perspective, but also from a self-awareness perspective. Because one of the things that I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed, and it might be too early for you, is as my son started to grow, I started to hear different people's voices and see different people's behaviors coming out of me. And by
Oh
different people's
wow.
voices and behaviors, I'm referring to, mum, dad, and other people that were
Yep.
around at that time.
Sure.
And that in itself has been so insightful to help me understand more about myself and be
Mm-hmm.
okay with the way I want to do things rather than just behaving based on, well, this is how I was shown. One of those aspects is I don't know what your philosophy is, but I'm pretty sure it'll be similar to mine on spanking. I remember,
Mm-hmm.
even a few years ago on Facebook, someone put up a post saying, I was spanked as a child and I grew up with this condition called respect for my elders. And I reshared that and I got a whole bunch of criticism over that because I wasn't a dad at the time. I didn't have a fucking clue.
Right.
But now, being a dad, I remember seeing my son. I've never hit him. I've
Mm-hmm.
smacked him maybe once or twice, but like I'm talking like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And the response was enough to never do it again. But I remember
Mm.
looking at my son when he was about 2.5 years of age. I saw him looking at him on the couch in our house, and I looked at him and I started visualizing myself doing everything to him that had been done to me from a disciplinary aspect.
Right.
I
Right.
don't look back on my childhood and say I was an abused child. I had a great childhood. I was very loved, but I copped a lot of fucking beatings. And I
Yeah.
started
Yeah.
looking at my son, and I ran through my head, and all of a sudden I just burst into tears. And
Mm.
I couldn't comprehend doing
Right.
those things. And I had this juxtaposition of this borderline of resentment towards my mum for doing it to me, but then this enormous level of compassion to go, fuck, what were you experiencing? As a
Yeah.
single mum, as a single parent, to want to discipline a child at that level. And it's been incredibly rewarding for me to see these loops come up, but have that level of mindfulness and awareness to go, whew, hang on, this isn't me, but let's have a look at where it comes from. And then let's now
Yeah.
look at how that's shaped me,
Right.
and let's learn a lesson from this. And yeah, I'm excited for you, mate, because 5 months in, do you like being a dad?
I do. I do. I'm ready for it. I think it's the new chapter in my life. I don't think I would have been ready for it anytime before 47. But I'm a little less angry today, so I'm ready for it. Yeah.
You will be tested. But yeah, I
Yeah.
gotta say,
I'm
being
sure.
a dad has made me a better person, better leader, better business person, better coach. I
Mm.
guess that's going to make you an incredible, even more incredible therapist than you are today.
Oh, thank you.
John, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I'd actually like to extend the invitation to catch up for a coffee, a drink, whatever,
Sure.
because you're an incredible human being.
Oh,
But
thank
I'm
you.
curious, what's next from here? Like, where are you going from here? I know you've got this book that's been coming out. You've got another one that you've just sold.
Yeah.
What's next?
I just more of the same, creating a dialogue, trying to live as solid as I can, trying to be mindful, trying to be present, and talk about anything that fires me up, that I'm passionate about. And so I don't know, but I'm excited to find out.
That's very cool. So if people want
Yeah.
to find out more about you and your book, where can they go to find out I used to be a miserable fuck?
So that book's wide. It's everywhere. And then
Yeah.
they could just find me on, I guess, on Instagram at The Angry Therapist. I'm pretty active on that platform.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, and thank you for creating a bridge between business and wellness. I love what you're doing, and I love that you are having these conversations. Which isn't necessarily business oriented, but they're definitely affect people in business.
Mate, thank you. I appreciate
Yeah.
you being on here. And like I said before, I think this is not going to be the last time that you and I talk.
Yeah, for sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank John Kim.
This episode was brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for business. There you have it, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Unstoppable with me, your host, Kerwin Ray. And please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you get to see all of these interviews in the flesh. Share this podcast with your friends and drop me a review on iTunes. I would love to hear what you guys think, and also let you know your comments help make sure that we keep producing killer content just like this. And if you'd like to stay up to date with all of my movements, upcoming podcasts, events, and much more, please jump onto the website kerwinray.com, and also check us out on all social media on the handle @KerwinRay. Thanks for joining us.